Students sometimes have a difficult time distinguishing between the two concepts of a greatest common factor or a least common multiple. So we're going to use this example. We're going to find both the greatest common factor and the least common multiple between two numbers of 16 and 24. Okay, so our two numbers that we're working with are 16 and 24. But let's talk a little bit about what each of these means. So the greatest common factor, let's kind of split this down the line here. The greatest common factor is the largest number that goes into both, say, 16 and 24. So the largest number that goes into both 16 and 24. So if we think about what that number is, okay, so sure, 2 goes into 16 and it goes into 24, but 4 goes into 16 and 24 too, but that's still not the largest number. It's not the greatest number. So the greatest, so we can think 2 and 4 both go into 16 and 24, right? They're both factors, but 8 is the greatest factor. Okay, so we have to think about the largest number, the largest factor that goes into both numbers. And as a sanity check, that number is always going to be smaller than or equal to the smallest given number. And these, looking for, when you're asked to find a greatest common factor, it might be to simplify, we might use it to simplify fractions, or factor polynomials, which we'll do later on. So that's when you're going to be looking for the greatest common factor. With the least common multiple, we're looking for the smallest number or the least number that both 16 and 24 go into. Okay, so and we're talking about multiples, right? So these are going to be larger numbers. So we can think about multiples. So multiples of 16, if I write this down, I have 16 and I multiply that by 2, I get 32. I multiply that by 3 and I get 48. Add another 16 and I get 64. If I did the same thing with my 24, if I double that, I get 48. And then I add another 24 to that and I get 72. Whoops, 72. And I can keep going and they'll meet up again. But the first number where they meet up is 48. So that means that 48 is the least common multiple. Okay, so again, as a sanity check, they're going to meet up again at 96, but 48 is the least common multiple. Right? And in general, as a sanity check, your least common multiple is going to be larger than or equal to the largest number given, because we're talking about multiples again. And we're going to be asked to find an LCM, or least common multiple, for adding and subtracting fractions, right? Or adding and subtracting fractions, we're going to need to find a common denominator. So let's go through and we'll do an exercise where we're looking for the least common multiple and the greatest common factors of 16 and 24. So we're looking at 16 and 24. Okay, so if I'm going to start off with the greatest common factor, and then I'll work out how to find the least common multiple. In either case, we're going to have to find the factors, the prime factors of each number. So if I look for the prime factors of 16, if I don't remember that right away, let's just do our factor tree. I have 16 is 4 times 4, 2 times 2, 2 times 2. So my prime factors are 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And for 24, I have 4 times 6. 4 is 2 times 2. 6 is 2 times 3. So I have 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. In the case of looking for the greatest common factor, I have 2's and 3's as both of my factors, right? They're factors, but only 2 exists for both 16 and 24. 3 is not a factor of 16, so I'm not going to worry about the 3's. So to find the greatest common factor, I looked to see what I have in common. The only thing I have in common are the 2's, and I take the smallest number of 2's that I have, which is the 1 in 24, so it's just 2 times 2 times 2. So my greatest common factor is 8. And again, if we checked ourselves, 8 is smaller than 16 and 24, right? And 8 goes into both 16 and 24. And it's the largest number, it's the greatest number that goes into both 16 and 24. Now to find the least common multiple, I'm going to still go ahead and take my prime factors, which I already found. And again, 2's and 3's are both factors. In this case, I don't care whether or not they exist in both, if they're factors of both of these numbers. I'm going to take the most I see in each of them. So this time I'm going to take 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 and 3. So my least common multiple, I'm going to multiply all these together, is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is 16, times 3, which gives me 48. So 48 is now my least common multiple. 48 is the smallest number that both 16 and 24 go into. Okay, so let's recap here. I'm going to erase my little scratch pad here, my scrap paper, and I will summarize. Right, so 8 is the greatest factor that goes into both 16 and 24. Nothing bigger that's in common between those two numbers is a factor. Sure, like I said before, 2 goes into it, but that's not the greatest. 4 goes into it, it's still not the greatest. 8 is the greatest common factor. And for the least common multiple, 48 is the lowest number that both 16 and 24 go, oops, erase that, go into. Okay, so sure, 16 and 24 go into 96, but the lowest number is 48. I hope that helps explain it a little bit. I know it was a little bit of a long explanation, but you can see side by side the difference between the greatest common factor and the least common multiple.